Good evening and welcome to GB Boxing and Fighting Irish. And with me this evening is Adam and Michael. Luke will be along shortly. We're just waiting on the very poor Irish public transport system, which is worse than the UK one, so you can imagine how that is. So this evening we are going to be looking at the boys are going to be giving us their best fighters in each of the old traditional weights over the last 50 years. So that's from 1972 to 2022. That's decimalization era, really. This is how I describe that, or you could say EU membership, but some people left, so we'll just go with decimalization. Right, so we'll kick it off. What's the best way to do this? Because I was going to go weight by weight, but obviously if Luke's not here, should we just go person by person?
Probably go weight by weight, just because it'll get confusing, and then when Luke jumps in, we'll just throw to him and be like, right, what did you have for this and this, depending on how far he gets in.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Great. So, and I've got Stevens, and in Stevens' defence, I had touted for this to be a UK and Ireland thing, but the consensus was no, we'll do it worldwide. But Stephen obviously didn't catch that and went with the original one, went with my idea, which is always good. I think I like Stephen there, which is he just went with UK and Ireland fighters. So I'll give Stevens as well in that, but just bear in mind they're only UK and Ireland, so it's not saying that they're better than the rest of the world or anything. But of course they are. Anyway, guys, so let's start off at flyweight. Who have we got down there?
Michael, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll kick us off. Okay, so obviously it's well documented that my knowledge of the lighter weights isn't as superior as Adam's, but I'm going to go with Mr. Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez for my pick of flyweight. I think with Gonzalez, I think in terms of the lighter weights, especially at flyweight, there's not a lot of publicity and well-known knowledge with the casual boxing fans. But I think with this guy, a lot of people know who he is. And on top of that, he's a great fighter. He's gone up and down the weight. He's been involved in some tremendous fights. He was pound for pound number one at one point when Mayweather retired. And I think this guy is just a superstar. He's fantastic. I love watching him. He's all action. And for me, since the 1970s era, he's my pick for flyweight.
Excellent.
Nice.
So who are you there, Adam?
So I went for a top three because I fully nerded out on all of this.
Not like you at all, Adam.
That's just to be fair to Michael, right? I don't know that much about flyweights from 50 years ago. This was the one that took me the longest to come up with. At number 3, I had A. Gonzalez, not Roman Gonzalez. I had A. Gonzalez, which is Betolio Gonzalez, who had a record of 76-12 and 52 with 52 knockouts. Just a ridiculously long reigning flyweight champion from the 70s, and a fabulous fighter. I found the name. I went, that's a good record. Went and watched it. I'm like, the guy's pretty bloody good. I wanted to have Inoue until doing a little bit of research. Inoue never fought at flyweight, which I didn't realize. He skipped it. He went from light fly to super fly. So for me, it was pretty simple. It was basically what you achieved at that. So from the outset, I'll kind of make this clear. If you didn't, your achievements at that weight is what mattered at this. So we'll get to weight classes where a lot of people are known for more of what they did at another weight class. It doesn't matter. So a guy like Joe Calzaghe. So for instance, Joe Calzaghe wouldn't appear in my weight class. I view Joe as the greatest super middleweight ever. But that doesn't matter when I talk about the light heavies. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It seems a bit harsh, but it is what it is, and that's your destination, and that's fine.
Listen, I'm not patriotic enough to say he's wrong. It's a matter of opinion end of the day,
That's exactly it. But I thought, that was basically my one. So I was like, right, can't have Inoue if he's not fought the weight. It's fair enough. Number 2 was Kanto, who had 14 total flyweight title defenses and a record of 61-9. That was another one from ages ago. I agree with Michael. Roman Gonzalez is the best flyweight of the last 50 years. He's one of my favorite fighters ever, one of the most amazing fighters you could possibly dream to watch. Watching him at flyweight, somewhere between light fly and super fly, he was pretty much untouchable. I've never seen a fighter as good as it was, and he's changed the game. He, like Michael said, he's the reason people know who these little guys are now. He's that good. And just an utterly incredible fighter. And Roman Gonzalez is my flyweight of the last 50 years.
Well, I think that's the general consensus, and I would agree with you guys anyway. Now, I would think you're being incredibly harsh on Inoue there, because I thought like the last time we were kind of moving people into divisions. So to say, well, you didn't fight there, so you're excluded. But that being said, even with that, I think what Chocolatito has done over the breadth of his career, this is over a 50-year span, is definitely superior to what Inoue has done. So regardless, had Inoue been included, I would have put Chocolatito ahead of him anyway. You know what I mean? I would have Inoue in there because I loved him. But I'm aware, like, this is all about depth and breadth and, legacy. So, I mean, Inoue's starting on his journey, whereas Chocolatito has had an incredible journey and absolute legacy that kind of, spans, for such a long time. Now, Stephen's UK and Irish ones, and I'm going to stress this is UK and Irish because I did send him on that bit of a bum steer. Well, he gave, and I wouldn't disagree anyway, Dave Boy McCauley got his UK and Irish flyweight champion. And so great little fighter, and absolutely. Then followed by Duke McKenzie, and an honourable mention then he gave was to Damien Kelly. So that was just UK and Irish fighters at that weight. So, but again, I'll stress that's UK and Irish because I led him down that path. But anyway, next we're going to sorry, I just jumping here. Yeah, bantamweight. No, because he didn't have a bantamweight down, so I that's why I knew there was bantamweight between flyweight and featherweight. So bantamweight is next. So who have you guys got for bantamweight? We'll go to who went first the last time? Michael did. So Adam.
Yeah, I believe I went first. Yeah. Who's going first? Me or Adam? Oh, sorry, Adam.
You can go, Michael. So I've got three.
Right.
So I'll waffle.
That's okay, mate.
That's right.
Oh,
right, so,
my authority's been usurped completely.
Fair enough. So at honourable mentions here were Wilfredo Gomez and Inayo Inoue. Were the two I was kind of looking at to try and get in here. Again, Inoue suffering from the fact that he's still fighting. So his resume and achievements at the weight class can still grow. Number 3 was Carlos Zarate. Someone we talked about on one of the previous ones. One of the hardest punching bantamweights you'll ever see in your life. I think he ended up, it was something like 61 knockouts out of 63 wins. Like, it's something ridiculous like that. Multiple title defenses. Then it was a toss-up between two. Ruben Olivares takes my second place. An incredible fighter with 83 wins, 13 losses, and another 79 KOs. One of the best bantamweights ever. And I think it was Jim Carras on Twitter had him as his best ever bantamweight. Utterly phenomenal fighter. And then I had Eddard Joffrey as the best ever bantamweight. Now, he was a bit of an interesting one for me. His best work was done in the 60s. But he did fight on into the 70s and, in fact, held the bantamweight and featherweight world title in there. So I decided to include him, someone we lost relatively recently, an utterly phenomenal fighter.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, Michael, who do you have there at bantamweight?
Okay, so at bantamweight, yeah, another division that I'm not going to challenge Adam too much on due to my subject knowledge, if you like. But hopefully, maybe later in the episode, I'll call him out on a few things.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen his list yet either, by the way. Just saying. So that's if I disagree. But I'm going to go with your boy Ender Inoue for this one. I think Inoue for me, I put him as number 1 at bantamweight. Mainly similar reasons to Chocolatito, really. I think it's a kind of a division that doesn't get shouted up from the rooftops as much from the casuals and sometimes even the hardcore fans. But I think Inoue's made such a big name for himself due to his performances, winning the Super 6 tournament, and the way he's just completely obliterated everyone, even including Dene, even though he didn't knock him out in the final. In the rematch, his revenge was getting the knockout, even though he'd won the first fight. That's how much of a monster this guy is. Yeah. And I think I've looked at the list of champions since the 70s. Even though I'm not too knowledgeable on them, they haven't kind of conquered the division like Inoue has. And I feel like Inoue, for me, of any champions from the last 40 or 50 years, I think Inoue would hold his own, or if not beat them. So that's why I've gone for Inoue, just the power and strength and the wave he's making in the flyweight division at the moment.
My one of the ones I was looking at was this, when I was looking through the history of like who won at bantamweight. One of the best fighters I've ever seen, but not necessarily one of the greatest, was Rigondeaux, the Cuban.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And this was his weight class, and I was like, I'd love to have seen Inoue versus Rigondeaux. That would have been utterly incredible.
Yeah, I remember when Rigondeaux beat Donaire, and no one really knew about Rigondeaux, apart from the Olympics. No one knew how good he would be as a pro. And I think, unfortunately, with Rigondeaux, he was a victim of his own success, I think. He was that good and so untouchable and didn't bring much money to the table. No one wanted to go near him, did he? Including Frampton, Quigg.
Oh, yeah.
None of them wanted it, did they?
He was blatantly ducked in quite a lot of things. But yeah, you're right. The problem was he was boring to watch. He wasn't very entertaining outside the ring either, and he was obscenely good.
Yeah. I remember there was a story from Freddie Roach, actually, that Rigondeaux came to the wild card for sparring quite often, and apparently Freddie wouldn't let Pacquiao near Rigondeaux at the sparring because he thought he didn't want, because obviously Pacquiao's the main man at the wild card. He didn't want Pac-Man to look silly, basically, even though, he could have used his size and strength to do Rigondeaux. But
Rigondeaux would have been one of those fighters where he'd have been comfortable at any of these. I just don't think he was given the opportunities to prove how incredible he was.
That's the problem. That's why he didn't quite make mine a bantam.
Yeah,
I think
it's exactly the same thing. You have to actually win it, but looking at him, he was incredible.
When I watched his sparring footage and different fights from the Olympics and stuff, oh my God, this guy was good.
Excellent. So just on bantamweight there, for UK and Ireland fighters, Stephen had Wayne McCullough, which I wouldn't disagree with for UK and Ireland anyway. Closely followed in second by Frampton, and I would agree that order is correct as well for UK and Ireland. And like he said, his best days were at super bantam, but always felt he was too small for some featherweights, which I would agree with. But so his bantamweights for the UK and Ireland was Wayne McCullough and Carl Frampton. So two Northern Ireland boxers there he had. Now we're moving on to our next one, to featherweight. So this is going to be a little bit more exciting. And Michael, you're going to kick us off now.
Yeah, so I gave this one quite a bit of thought. But with featherweight, I'm going to go with the Pac-Man, Manny Pacquiao. I think Pacquiao was an absolute beast of featherweight. I thought he was in a really good era. You had the likes of Marquez, Morales, Barrera, and I think he was the main man who came out on top. Even though you could dispute some of the Marquez fights that he had, that they were very close. You could have gave it either way, but ultimately, I know Ender, you don't like the whole saying of the record books. Pacquiao did win. I think he came out on top in those victories. So and I think Pacquiao was he's such hard punch in featherweight as well. Hence why he went up in weights and started destroying everyone after that point as well, regardless whether you think it was clean or not. But that's for another conversation.
We're just pulling apart.
But I think Pacquiao featherweight could have dusted anyone on his day from the 1970s to that weight, and I think he was an absolute machine. So yeah, I'll go with Pacquiao.
There you go, Adam. What's your top three? I take it.
So I will. So Pacquiao was an interesting fighter that came up in a couple of weight classes for me, and I think Manny's biggest issue was he didn't stick around at any weights long enough to really establish a legacy at one weight outside of probably welterweight. I think he was quite brief at feather. So for me, I favor longevity. So my third pick was actually Eusebio Pedraza, famous for being the man that Brian McGuigan beat for the world title. 19 consecutive world title defenses. Unbelievable record. Unbelievable fighter. And I've literally only ever watched him lose to Barry. So sometimes the numbers don't lie. And number two was Salvador Sanchez, one of the greatest ever Mexican fighters. Utterly incredible man. You go watch his fight with Gomez. Utterly brilliant. And number one was Alexis Arguello. This one was one of the easier picks for me. I think Alexis Arguello is by far the best featherweight I've ever seen. And it's funny that you picked Pac-Man because that was a mythical matchup a friend of ours did. I think it was Adam's boxing show.
Yeah. Well, he just
put that up. And I picked Arguello. He's all wrong for Manny. One of the best right hands you'll ever see in your life. Alexis Arguello, utterly incredible fighter. That was my pick at featherweight.
Yeah, I don't take your word for that one, Adam, because I haven't seen a lot of Aguayo, but I take your word for that one for sure.
Well, I hadn't either, and Stephen actually kind of introduced me to Aguero, and I've watched so much of his fights now, and even, you see it on Twitter now, and automatically I see the word and I click in immediately to look at it because he was such an amazing fighter. So I would agree even. Aguero would probably be my pick too. Pac-Man would, of course, be up there as well. Stephen, now, of course, so we're now in featherweight, so he's gone for the great Irish featherweight, Barry McGuigan, which is unsurprising. It's just UK and Ireland, followed by Naz. Honourable mentions to Scott Harrison, who I think I remember you said, Michael, was your
kind of underrated boxer.
Underrated
but, kind of underachieved probably because due to his own personal issues.
Due to his own personal issues, he was definitely an underachiever. And Colin McKillen was his other one there, UK and Ireland at featherweight. We're going to go on to the next weight. Sorry. Lightweight is next. I may have to leave you guys shortly, but I'm sure Adam can take the reins. Can't you?
I think so. I don't know if we'll be able to. We'll figure it out with the
have you set up anyway?
We'll just debate each other. We'll agree or disagree.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not going to turn off anything. I'll just, let it go on and let it finish. So anyway, so we're up to lightweight now, and whoever wants to go first there now can go first for lightweight.
Michael, do you want to fire away?
Do you want to kick us off, Ad, or shall I?
I'll kick this one off because I'm going to preempt this, right? I reckon the guy I have at number 2 is the guy that Luke is going to have at number 1. So number 3, I have Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., one of the most incredible fighters you'll ever see. And I think lightweight, super featherweight, lightweight was his best weight class. I know a lot of the big fights were at light welter and welter, but dude, this guy was unbelievable. Like, such an underappreciated defensive fighter because he was one of the most incredible offensive fighters you'll ever see. Just go watch him win the title, man. Utterly phenomenal fighter. And number 2 is Pernell Whitaker. Basically, it was the toss-up for the two for me, and Pernell beat Chavez, in my opinion. Pernell, again, another one of those guys. Not the style I loved. I know it's the style Luke loves, and the guy was now untouchable. But I think the universal consensus, unless Michael has something different to say, the best ever lightweight is Manos Despiedra, Roberto Duran.
I could see very few disagreeing with that. Pernell Whitaker fans, of course, would, but I mean, like Duran's legacy is kind of so well known that I wouldn't disagree. But I'll let you wax lyrical about the man there for a moment, because I noticed I did jump in on top of you the second you said it.
Yeah, do you know what? I kind of wish I went first now, because I'll be honest, I'm echoing it's completely the same, exactly the same as Adam. Really, there was 3 guys I kind of put in my top 3, and they were Pernell Whitaker, Julio Chavez, and Roberto Duran. And for me, Roberto Duran, I think, kicks both their asses in his prime. I'm telling you now. I think Roberto Duran was a different monster, man. Like,
where's Luke?
He's on his way.
Whitaker had the skills, and arguably one of the most skillful boxers there's ever set foot in the ring. And Chavez, Chavez is probably the greatest Mexican boxer there's ever. Well, he is the greatest Mexican boxer of all time. The amount of fights that he had, and he fought in 2 different eras almost as well, Chavez. But for me, Duran was different animal, different breed. And when he won the world title, I think as well, people forget there was only one champion at the time. You have to beat the man. Yeah. He made loads of defenses, and then even went all the way up to, I think it was super middleweight, I believe, was the highest weight that he went up to.
He won a world title at middleweight. He beat Iron
middleweight.
Barkley.
That's it. Because he fought Iron Barkley, didn't he, at middleweight, and fought Hagler at middleweight, and just shows the kind of beast he was. He went up through the different weights. Fought in the greatest era of boxing ever, and I just think Duran was just a machine. I think Duran at lightweight is not just the greatest lightweight since the 1970s. I'm going to make a case for him being the greatest lightweight ever, I think. Duran.
Yeah, that's I'd 100% agree. I don't think anybody's
Well, I don't think there would be too many disagreeing with you there at all.
absolutely phenomenal fighter. For me, he's easily in my top 10 greatest of all time in general, Duran. So
I will make the argument that Roberto Duran is the greatest pound for pound fighter since the 50s. Like since Ray Robinson. That's how good Duran was.
I could argue with you with that, but I think I'll take us to that's probably for another episode. But
oh man,
no,
he was
great fighter for sure.
The most well-rounded fighter you could possibly imagine. The way he go inside the difference between him and Chavez and the Whittaker. If I were to go Whittaker versus Chavez, that did happen. And Duran would be able to close the distance in the way that Chavez couldn't. He was the most well-rounded fighter. It's utterly phenomenal. An absolute head case of a man. But I mean, he beat Ken Buchanan for the world lightweight title and cost Ken Buchanan a testicle. Like that's how much he was willing to go to win that fight. Oh man, Duran is the best lightweight ever. Utterly incredible fighter.
Another shot I'd like to get lightweight. Someone who often gets overlooked because of what else he did in his career. Shane Mosley was a beast at lightweight as well, and a lot of people. That's when he was really knocking people out. Shane Mosley and
I had Mosley and De La Hoya were two I was looking at going. That was it. Like two really, really good fighters. Shane's biggest thing, I think, was he was just like he wasn't De La Hoya and he wasn't Trinidad.
Yeah.
That's what caused Shane. That and the fact that he openly admitted to abusing steroids, which is,
that's the problem, Mosley. Yeah,
that's a PR problem.
Yeah, and and there was at one point I believe Mosley was pound for pound number one for a short time as well.
Well, after he beat De La Hoya.
Yeah, that's it. But like you said, the different things that happened in his career, I think, is why he kind of doesn't get put into that question of whether he would be the greatest lightweight of all time. Because
I think he would be he's in the conversation for a top 10. Like that's just for the goodness, how good Shane was. He was a phenomenal fighter.
Yeah.
But it's just I think Duran's the one. I think, like I said, the only other cases you could make is Benny Leonard this way. Joe Gann, Benny Leonard. I think they're around lightweight. So you're talking 100 in living memory. It's Duran.
Yeah. Oh no,
Duran and then Daylight for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's loads of lightweight, absolutely loads. You can make a case for it if you really wanted to dig in to that division. There's so many you could.
Oh yeah, there's so many there, but I do agree with Adam that Duran sits on top of the pile. The only thing is,
100%.
Some of his fights later on, but weren't lightweight, weren't his shining glory either.
No, well, he was one of those guys who he let himself down more than anything else.
Oh yeah, but I mean, like I would say, that. In kind of current modern day things, you look at two people I think that did that. Was Lopez was one, Teofimo Lopez. I think he just went on the beer after he won, and then he lost to Kambosos, and kind of that all ran downhill. And as well with Ruiz, I mean, after he just went to celebrate.
Duran.
Well, I'm not saying they're the same as Duran. I'm just saying. Kind of.
No, but there's a legitimate point to be made here, right? What you're talking about there is Lopez and Ruiz hit the massive highs, let themselves go, and had a massive low, right? Duran did that. Duran fought, if I get this correct, at least he's 103 wins and 16 losses, and I'm sure he had a couple of draws in there as well, right? So that is about 120 fights. He was able to have those highs, have those lows, and then build up a comeback. If you're fighting twice a year, or even once a year in their cases, how are you meant to build up anything coming back if your last impression for over a year is they went out on the lash, his head's gone, and then you've got say the titles get tied up in with Lopez and Haney, and then he moves up and it's Lopez and Taylor. How are you meant to get a title shot? So now it's been 2-3 years and you've done nothing. And with modern day boxing fans, if you've done nothing for 2 years, I've lost interest in Keith Thurman because Keith Thurman did absolutely nothing for years, absolutely years. He treated it as a part-time job. He was a unified welterweight champion. If you're going to fight, fights matter more now. Losses matter more now because you're not fighting as much.
Yeah, because
Duran fought constantly and he fought the best. And that's one of the reasons that he's so loved.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean,
Stephen's correct.
But Oh yeah,
Funny enough, I watched a sparring video of Nigel Benn and Roberto Duran, and Duran is obviously clearly quite old, bit overweight,
Yeah.
and holding his own against Nigel Benn, who was clearly in his prime. This is from about, I think this is from like 1990 or something, and Duran is really giving Ben a run for his money. You can see all the little dirty tricks.
I'm letting Luke loose on you now. Now, Luke, they've
Yes.
gone with Duran over Whitaker. They were saying you may have an issue with that, but I'll let you tell them whether you do or you don't.
Shall we go through who we picked
I
for?
see the fume cut of his
Oh,
ears.
sorry. If you want to review the last few,
Yeah.
now I am going to have to go now, but
That's
you're
okay.
all in.
Will I just run through bantamweight and featherweight really quick?
Yeah, all the way up to lightweight, but
my
whole
top three.
lightweight. Yeah.
Yeah.
So bantamweight, I had Inui, number 1. I think he's the
Lightweight.
best of the last 50 years. Then I had, put this in whichever order you want, I had Morales and Barrera.
So you're not even willing to order them.
Well, I have Morales first, but that's because I thought his name first. So
Yeah.
put him number 2 if you want.
No, I was just wondering if you had a definite kind of 1 and 2, because it changes for me the whole time anyway.
I think, to be honest with you, I think Morales, only because he was able to go up the weights and prove himself that bit more. Like his fight against Maidana,
Mm-hmm.
that's a cracker of a fight. If you've not watched it, definitely give it a watch, because Morales is as tough as they come, even at 10 stone. Then at featherweight, I had Alexis Arguello. Then I had Salvador Sanchez, and at number 3 I had Manny Pacquiao. I think personally, if Sanchez would have lived a bit longer, he'd have been my number 1. But Arguello, because of the career he had, was at number 1 for me. At lightweight, you're gonna laugh. I'll cover number 3, but I can't cover number 3. I'll just delete him there. So
we're on the same wavelength then.
Yeah.
Whitaker first, and then
Oh.
Duran.
Not sure me and Adam agree with that. I'm afraid.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, you're in the minority today, except I think Stephen has got your back.
I think Whitaker is Duran's worst nightmare. If you think what Ray Leonard did in the rematch was bad, I think Whitaker would have absolutely bamboozled him and would have made him say no mass as well. And he's a southpaw. It's just all wrong for Duran.
What about over 15 rounds?
Over 15, it's the same story, I think.
You reckon?
What about Duran that actually turns out? So the difference was, again, we all know in the Ray Leonard rematch, Duran let himself go and Ray caught him as he was coming down.
Yeah. But I still think you can't train that no matter how long you're in the gym or how long you're out of it. And the fact that he did quit out of just pure frustration, I think if you look at who went through the weights better, obviously it was Duran. But I just think at lightweight, which is
again, this is because this is just lightweight. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think lightweight, they're both at their best.
Yeah.
I think it's the best both men at that weight.
I have to go now, but I'm not turning off anything in case I knock you all out.
Yeah.
Keep talking away and the light will just go off. See you guys.
See you later.
Right. Did you have a fly?
At flyweight, I actually didn't even do flyweight. I forgot all about it. I started
Yeah.
Start the bantam.
All professional.
So we agreed on Gonzalez.
But yeah, so you have Duran, don't you?
Yeah, both of us have Duran.
And lightweight.
Okay.
Yeah.
At lightweight, so I'll briefly run you through mine. So at flyweight, I had Gonzalez.
Yeah.
At bantamweight, I had Zarate third, Ruben Oliveira second, and Eder Joffrey first.
Was Joffrey within the time scale?
He was just. So I checked up on BoxRec, and he fought till 76. So the thing with him is his best days were the 60s, but he fought into the 70s enough that I was able to include him.
So my criteria was started after.
Right, okay, so mine was just involved.
So they boxed within those. That was your one.
Yeah, so as long as they had a significant, like they couldn't have like had their last fight in 1972, and then I would have included them. They had to have, so he won a world title within that time frame.
Yeah, that's what I've done.
Okay, so all mine were after 72.
Fine, cool. So at featherweight, I had Pedraza, Eusebio Pedraza, Salvador Sanchez, and Alexis Arguello.
Not too dissimilar.
Yeah, we had the same.
Yeah, so we have mine. So flyweight, I had Chocolatito, like Adam. Bantamweight, I had Inoue, like you, Luke. And then at featherweight, I had Pacquiao there. And then lightweight, Duran. So me and Adam agreed Duran. You're challenging us with Whittaker.
Pacquiao versus Pedraza.
Yeah, I think Pacquiao, man, was so powerful at featherweight. He was so explosive, hence why he was able to go up to the heavier weights and did what he did. Despite people arguing whether it was clean or not.
Yeah, I
think
there's another reason why he was able to go up those weights. But that's
let's just say let's live in a fantasy world. Maybe
where
peds don't exist. We'll live in that kind of world. Let's sit there.
Yeah, perfect.
In fairness to Manny, if we're talking about fighters that actually failed drugs tests, Morales failed a drugs test, not Manny Pacquiao.
Yeah.
So it's one of those ones where you go. To be honest, I was looking at my list and wondering how many of them hadn't failed a drugs test and weren't actually on peds, and I think most of them were. So that's a debate for another one. So I've got so far that we've agreed on Gonzalez is the number one flyweight.
Yeah.
At bantamweight, we're split between Joffrey, Inoue, and you had.
Now, if me and you had the same criteria, Adam, it would be Joffrey. Me too.
Okay, but so did you have Inoue?
I had Inoue.
Yeah. Okay, so if you both picked Inoue, we'll go with Inoue then.
Okay.
And then we had Arguello at featherweight.
Yeah.
So I'm just taking note of all this. Right. Now for the one that I think is going to cause some fun. Welterweight. So we're going to go Michael, we're going to go Luke, then we're going to go me to finish.
Oh, fuck me. So many good fighters in this. This is when it really... I mean, lightweight for me was when it kicks off, but welterweight is such an in-depth division, isn't there? So many
ridiculously
fighters. This is the one that probably took me longest to really put a finger on who is number one for me. So honorable mentions, obviously, you got to go with Floyd Mayweather. He's there. My favorite fighter of all time, Tommy Hearns. Really wanted to pick him, but he didn't quite get it for me. So I had to narrow it down, and I've gone with Sugar Ray Leonard because I think Sugar Ray Leonard fought, and for me, like I said earlier, the best era of boxing, I think, to date, and the opponents that he beat. And he in that era of the Benitez, Hearns, Hagler, Duran, Leonard, I feel like Leonard was the one who came out on top, really, out of all five of them. He was number one in the end. And that's why I'm going to go with Sugar Ray Leonard as the best welterweight within 1972 to current. I think he's the best. So, yeah.
Okay.
What you got to say, Luke?
Yeah, welterweight was a hard one because not many great boxers in history in the welterweight division. Yeah, I agree. Sugar Ray Leonard, number one. I say this because even though I think head to head we're doing greatest instead of the best, aren't we? So he's got better wins than Floyd Mayweather. He's got better wins than Benitez. And they were my 2 and 3. Thomas Hearns was a very close call on being in my top 3. I think he would have given Floyd Mayweather the hardest fight out of anyone ever in the welterweight division. Of the champions, I should say.
Would have battered him.
Yeah, it's a tough style matchup, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Ray Leonard has the greatest wins, and it was his weight division. The fact that I even put Floyd up there with him is testament to him, considering he should really only be a lightweight, like welterweight max. Benitez, you know what I think of Benitez. We spoke about that in another previous one, but yeah, Ray Leonard takes it for me.
Nice. So I'm taking that down.
Go on, Ad.
Right. So my top 3. Yeah, again, like this is one of those ones where I looked at certain weight classes, and I was going, there's not actually been that many great fighters in this weight class in the last 50 years. So I'm looking at middleweight and light heavyweight particularly. This one was ridiculous. Like the amount of incredible fighters at this was so hard. So number 3, I had Tommy Hearns. I agree with Luke. He's the worst possible nightmare for Floyd. Floyd is the benchmark that people our age generally get. Tommy Hearns is all wrong for him. Utterly
for anyone, he's all wrong, isn't he? He's probably the worst.
6'1", right hand from God. Tommy Hearns was an incredible fighter. And I reckon nowadays would have been pretty much untouchable at welterweight because over 12 rounds he's got the tank to do it. At number 2 is Floyd. Floyd's resume at welterweight is absolutely ridiculous and in and around it. Phenomenal fighter. And I know Luke and I don't agree on this, but my number 1 pick we do agree on, which is Sugar Ray Leonard, but I think Leonard beats Floyd. Ray Leonard is, if Duran's not the complete fighter, it's Ray Leonard. He is big for a welterweight. He's fast as hell, and at welterweight was knocking people spark out. An utterly incredible fighter. And Benitez, Duran, and Hearns at welterweight is the most complete resume in modern boxing. It's that good at one weight class. That was it. So Ray Leonard for me is the number 1 welterweight in the last 50 years. And again, much like Duran, I didn't think this was a particularly close one either.
Okay.
Nice. So we all 3 agree on Sugar Ray Leonard?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Middleweight. Yeah. This was a more difficult one, I thought, in general. I think there's been some really good fighters, but I don't think there's been that many great welterweights in the last 50 years. This time we're going to go Luke, Michael, and then I'll finish off.
Okay, so my number 1, which I hope is everyone's number 1, is Marvelous Marvin Hagler.
You'll find out in a minute.
My number 2 is Bernard Hopkins. And my number 3, which I'm just going to say because you've been picking from who had a career in the 70s, Carlos Monzon. He wouldn't have been included in my previous criteria. It would have been actually Mike McCallum. But I'm going to stick Monzon in there because he was just a beast.
Yeah, I think McCallum was more light middleweight as well, wasn't he? That's what his best days were.
His peak was light middle, but he had some fantastic fights at middleweight.
No, yeah, he was a great fighter, not that one. That.
What are you going to say, Michael?
Will you come to me now? Sorry, yeah. So very similar to Luke's. So I'll start with number 3. Number 3 for me is actually Hopkins. I've got him there. Yeah, a dominant champion for such a long time, made loaded defenses. Yeah, what more can you say about Bernard Hopkins? Just a great fighter, but not quite my number 1. Number 2, then, I'm going to go with James Toney. I think James Toney was such a skillful fighter. In that 90s period, he was an animal. And yeah, I mean, up until the Roy Jones fight, looked pretty much invincible. I feel like when Eubank and Ben, they didn't want anything to do with James Toney, the other side of the pond. Obviously, Tony got some great wins as well against like Mike McCallum. Michael Nunn was a fantastic win. I think Tony was kind of almost a victim of his own success. I don't think the attitude was there with Tony, unfortunately. He had the skills for days, but I think there was a bit of that kind of, I don't know, I think his ego got the better of him at times and he wasn't as dedicated as he should have been. There was a story actually with Tony, I think with Steve Collins. I think Steve Collins said he watched Tony spar at the wild card, and in between rounds he was drinking cans of Coke or something.
Yeah,
really like dedication. Yeah, but yeah, number 1, yes, Luke, it's got to be Marvin Hagler. That was his division. A guy who had to wait so long to get a shot. No one wanted to fight him. Got robbed in his first shot at the title, and then ended up taking it in the his next opportunity, and just defended the belt for so long. And middleweight really was, when you think of the great middleweight fighters, Marvin Hagler is the first person I think that comes to most people's minds. Is fair to say.
Yeah, it's one of those ones. Quick thing on James Toney. Only James Toney could be a 3-weight world champion. All of us consider him what could have been.
Yeah, I know.
Exactly.
It's just nuts. So
Adrian Broner's Adrian Broner, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, just one of those. Oh, incredible. Yeah, Tony's wins against Nunn and the draw. Was it the draw middleweight against McCallum?
I mean, yeah, three fights in McCallum.
They
at the
did.
end.
Oh, phenomenal. The most difficult bit for me on this one was who was to have it number 3. I sided with my man Golovkin, but it was a coin flip between him and B-Hop. Like the two of them, ridiculous number of title defenses. I just prefer the way Golovkin went about it to the way Hopkins did. I think neither of them were over the best middleweights in the world. In terms of, it wasn't the strongest division at the time.
Yeah.
But I thought Hopkins was an utterly incredible fighter. I thought Golovkin, for me, should have won that Canelo fight, at least one of them.
Yeah.
And that just tipped the edge. I thought that was a legitimate win for Golovkin, and that would be better than the De La Hoya or the Trinidad stuff at middleweight for Hopkins. Number 2, I have Monzon, an absolute animal of a middleweight. Never stopped in over 90 fights, 87 wins, nearly 59 knockouts, ridiculous number of title defenses. I think it was 14. Carlos Monzon was a horrible human being, a horrible fighter.
I think he was like Clubber Lang in real life.
Yeah, just like incarnate.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I had Monzon at 2. Hagler's my favorite of all the four of the four kings. Hagler's my guy. Robbed against Santafermo. Had his night ruined against Minter, which is like an eternal shame on British boxing, as if we don't need more. The best middleweight for years before he was ever actually champion. Defended it for 7 years, 11 title defenses. I thought he beat Ray Leonard. Marvin Hagler was the best middleweight ever. This one was the easiest pick for me by a million miles. Big up Marvin Hagler. So that was a fairly unanimous one, which is always fun. Right. Don't know about you guys, but the next one was comfortably the hardest one for me to pick. It took me days to go through this one.
Okay. Mine was done in a couple of minutes, to be honest.
Yeah, same here.
Did you? This took me ages to try and settle down who was the best of the.
Although this would be the most Luke Byrne list ever.
Yeah. Right. Go on, Luke. What have you got?
Roy Jones, number 1. I don't think anyone beats him in his prime, to be honest. And he fought some decent fighters, including a British fighter in Clinton Woods, who turned out to be very, very good.
Yeah,
made Clinton Woods look like nothing.
Destroyed him.
It was a embarrassment, and yet look what Clinton Woods went on to do. And he says in one of his songs, he says, "They say I don't fight nobody, I just make them look like nobody." And it's true, he did, and he's the man who made me fall in love with the sport. So, I have a great affinity to Roy Jones. Amazing man, amazing fighter. Number 2 and 3 were harder because I have Jones head and shoulders above the others, to be honest. But I am gonna go with Artur Beterbiev. To be honest with you, I think he hits too hard for a lot of the great fighters at light heavyweight that have been and gone. There are some great men out there, unbelievable chins, fantastic, heart, the whole lot. But I just think Beterbiev would have KO'd them. And in at number 3 is Spinks. Went up to heavyweight, won himself a title. Obviously, what happened against Mike Tyson happened, but at light heavyweight, he was a beast. And an honourable mention, a man that very nearly made the cut, who probably, I would say arguably was the hardest hitting light heavyweight before Beterbiev, was Michael Moorer. I think his punch power, we'd seen a modern version with Adonis Stevenson, but I think Moorer was a much more complete fighter and hit that bit harder as well, which he carried up to heavyweight and proved it. But yeah, that's my top 3 with Roy Jones at number 1. I just can't look past him.
Michael?
Great. Okay, so I'm going to mention 3 boxers here. So at number 3, I think this one's a little bit debatable, and I understand why it can be, because he spent most of his time at super middleweight. But my number 3 is Andre Ward. I think from the 1970s to the current time, I think Andre Ward is you can't really argue that he is one of the best champions that have been in that division. Obviously, he thought Kovalev was an absolute beast at the time, and he was the one no one wanted to touch for some reason. For one reason or another, him and Don Stevenson was the fight to make for years. Didn't happen. I actually saw your tweet the other day, Adam.
Yeah.
I still get that fight didn't happen as well. But Kovalev was just punching holes through everyone, and Ward then took a bit of time out after conquering super middleweight due to legal issues, and then came back, beat Sullivan Barrera, and then I know some no hoper. But then he fought Kovalev not once but twice, and really proved that I think Ward, by beating Kovalev, proved that he was the main man in that division at the time, and I think he would have beaten Stevenson as well if they'd fought, in my opinion. So I've got Andre Ward at number 3.
Can I interject with a question?
Yeah, go on.
What do you say to the people that thought Kovalev won the first fight and that's why they had 2 fights?
I can definitely see where the argument comes from, and they can make a case for that. It was a very close fight, for sure. And if Kovalev had taken that, I wouldn't have argued.
And you're forgetting
fight.
You're forgetting his biggest fight at light heavyweight, which was Paul Smith.
Well, do you know what? I was going to mention that, and I was thinking, I'm not even going to go there because
that actually counters your argument, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if in terms of the names he's beaten, granted he hasn't beaten a phenomenal list of names, but I do feel he went up to light heavy and beat the lineal champion, who no one wanted to go near, who everyone was scared of, and who was absolutely battering everyone. And he beat him twice. And I think even though the first fight was close, the second fight, the way he won that rematch showed that he was the better boxer, in my opinion, and retired on the high. And I do feel like he could have, in my opinion, he would have beaten Stevenson and Pascal and whoever was around at the time, even though Beterbiev was on the rise, but it would have been too soon for that fight. So moving away from Andre Ward, number 2, same as Luke, I've got Michael Spinks. He was a champion for such a long time. Fought some good names. Dwight Cowie was a big name at the time that he managed to beat. And yeah, I look at his record for BoxRec. He held the belt for a long time and even went up to heavyweight. So he had a really great career. And then at number 1, same as Luke, I've got Roy Jones. Even though it's a weird one with Roy, because obviously he went up and down with divisions, and he didn't spend an awful long time at light heavyweight, but when he was, I think at light heavyweight was where he was at his absolute physical peak in his prime, can't be touched, absolutely simply unstoppable. He was such an athletic specimen, and I just feel like you could put him against almost anyone in a light heavyweight in any era, and that's when he was at his physical prime. That's when he was punching the hardest. That's when he was fastest. And yeah, Roy Jones. What more can you say?
Fair. Right. I'm going to be the lone dissenting voice on this one. So at number 3, I have Michael Moore. I thought he was a really, again, one of those guys who's what he achieved at heavyweights was nuts. And 22 wins, 20 fights, 22 wins, 22 KOs at light heavyweight, the champion. He was fantastic. Yeah. At number 2, this is where I have Roy. I think Roy is the best fighter of the last 50 years, outside of maybe Duran and Leonard. Duran, Leonard, and then probably Roy. And the only difference is Roy never had Duran and Leonard to fight. Mm-hmm. Roy is unbelievable. But my complaint at light heavyweight is he didn't fight the names. There weren't that many at the time, but there was an individual who had, I think it was WBO, whose name I can't remember, who he didn't fight. And that's something that stuck in my mind on that one when I was trying to decide. Roy's the best of the light heavyweights. I don't think he was the greatest.
He was Eastern European, am I correct?
He was, and I can't pronounce his name, nor can I remember it. But that was one of the interesting ones. I wonder why that fight didn't happen.
He didn't want to fight in US.
Right. Okay.
That was one of the big things, and Roy didn't want to leave the US, which was the same reason he never ended up fighting the four kings in England.
Oh, okay.
They didn't want to go to the US.
They didn't want to go out. Okay, that's always interesting. So Roy, that was my kind of only bone against Roy on that front. I actually don't agree that Roy's peak was at light heavy. I think Roy Jones at super middleweight is the most untouchable fighter I ever saw. The Tony fight That was unbelievable. At number 1, I had Michael Spinks.
Oh,
I had Spinks at 1, but just with the win over Eddie Davis, Dwight Kwai, and Eddie Mustafa Muhammad. I thought those 3 wins were 3 really, really quality wins, and that was just enough to edge him over Roy in terms of resume at light heavyweight for me. Because that's who we had.
Look, I won't argue. Like, you know,
Sorry, mate, you had my thing broke up.
I had Michael Spinks.
Sorry, Adam. Well, who was your number 1? Michael Spinks.
Michael Spinks. It was Spinks. So it's good. So again, like I spent ages. You guys were like, right, I know who it is, and we've all kind of came up with the same thing. I had Beterbiev and Kovalev as honourable mentions.
Okay. So we're all in there among.
Yes, we're all in among the same fighters, so in around the right area. But it looks like Roy Jones gets our title. Right, this is going to be fun because I know my answer, I know Enda's answer, I know Luke's answer. So Michael, I'm coming to you first. You'll probably have the deciding vote here. Heavyweight.
Okay.
Talk to me, man.
So yeah, again, obviously we're all kind of doing this slightly differently, but like I said, we're doing it from 1970. My view on it is doing it any current fighter from 1972. Sorry, any fighter from 1972 to the current time, who I think is the best. And for me, this guy over here, man, for me, this guy is. I know it's cliche, and a lot of people say it, but he's the greatest boxer of all time for me, because of what he did in the sport, the era he fought in, the fighters he fought, what he did in his career, inside and outside of boxing. But for me, he is the great one. And that win against George Foreman, he had no right to win that fight. Foreman was destroying everyone. Everyone thought Ali was done, and he went over to Zaya and he done the business. And the fights that he had with Frazier, he even won it a 3rd time against Leon Spinks, who was the young pup at the time, who just won the Olympic gold medal, who they fast-tracked. And it was a shame how things happened with Larry Holmes, but just look at Ali's record, the who's. I think for me, from 1972 onwards, Ali is, for me, the best heavyweight ever. So, yeah. Oh, obviously, honourable mention. If we've got honourable mentions, where do I start? You've got Lennox Lewis, you've got Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, George Foreman. There's absolutely, the list goes on at heavyweights, but yeah, if I'm going to pick, if we're picking one, for me, it's Ali.
Yeah. Look.
I'll start off at the bottom and work my way up to the top here. So I had, so number 3 was a tough one because it's a very hard slot to fill. But I'm going to put George Foreman in there. His comeback will never ever be replicated. What he did was incredible, and he beat one of my honourable mentions in Michael Moore to win that belt. Had absolute wars, with Evander Holyfield, Tommy Morrison, people he'd no right being in the ring with at that age. Never mind, going the distance and really putting up a fight with them. And then what he did in his previous career obviously doesn't count too much in my rankings. But yeah, he's fairly solidly there. He's one of the top heavyweights of all time. And I think number 3 is just about right with the 2 men I have above him. And number 2 is Lennox Lewis. I think it's very hard to find a more complete heavyweight than Lennox. When you go footwork, hand speed, jab, power, size. But one thing he was missing was the chin. And someone who has that chin, who has everything else Lennox had and better, was Larry Holmes. The greatest heavyweight of all time, in my opinion. Now, if you tell me Joe Louis is the greatest, I'm not going to argue with you. But for me, it is Larry Holmes. He just has a lot, and he's number 1 for me, head and shoulders above Lewis and Foreman. Do
you think Larry Holmes beats? I think the best version of Ali was the '60s version, but do you think that Larry Holmes beats the '60s version of Muhammad Ali?
Yeah.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah, I do.
I'm actually with Luke on that. I think the '60s version of Ali was too small.
Okay.
He was only 214 pounds.
Yeah. Remember, Ali won the gold at light heavyweight.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, I'm one of those people. I don't rate Ali or Tyson nearly as high as the vast majority do. My all-time heavyweight top 10 doesn't include Tyson and barely includes Ali. I know it's very controversial.
That is controversial.
Yeah,
It
come
is.
on now.
It is.
Come
But I
on.
do think there are just greater fighters than him. He called himself the greatest, and he was the prettiest. He was the fastest. But yeah, I think in the question you're asking, Michael, I do think Larry Holmes beats him.
Oh, that's a bold call. In fairness, I'm actually with you on the Tyson thing, which is a totally separate video we can talk about.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you on the Tyson thing. So this was a really fun one for me because I actually looked at the list of fighters, and this is 3 of my top 4 top heavyweights ever. The only person in my top 4 that isn't available for this list is Joe Louis, who is my second pick ever. So at number 3, I have Lennox Lewis, who narrowly nudges out George Foreman. I think Lennox is the greatest heavyweight of the 90s, and I think that's the second best era. Lennox's resume is utterly phenomenal, and like Luke says, short of 2 questionable moments for his chin, the dude had it was a very strange run with Lennox because he had an unbelievable chin, except for 2 moments in his career. Other than that, he was in there with some unbelievable fighters, and his chin stood up. So it was always a weird one for me. But yeah, so I had Lewis just edging out George Foreman. Then at number 2, I have Larry Holmes. I'm not as high as Luke on Larry Holmes, but I love Larry Holmes. Man, this dude had absolutely everything. And Holmes and Lennox Lewis are the 2 people I favor in almost every mythical matchup because I think they just go down so well. The feet are brilliant. The jab's incredible. Both of them had the power. My criticism of Larry Holmes has got nothing to do with Larry Holmes, and it's he didn't have the guy. He didn't have the dance partner to prove how good he was. He didn't have the George Foremans. He didn't have the Joe Frazier's.
No.
That was Larry's biggest problem. But I have Larry in at number 2. 19 consecutive title defenses is utterly ridiculous number.
In a division where anything can happen.
Absolutely, and this is the thing. I think what we all kind of forget is most world champions now, right, will go along for and they will defend the title on average about 1 to 3 times, and then they will lose a fight, either be a step up in a unification or they'll just slip up. Larry Holmes defended the heavyweight title. He legitimized the governing body in the IBF. Larry Holmes was just an unbelievable fighter, and one that I think gets not enough praise, but he's getting a bit more love now that we can kind of look back and go, oh yeah, he was the bollocks. It's Ali's the best ever. I think he's the greatest heavyweight of all time. Whether you can debate if he's the best, that's fine. I'll have that discussion. But to have the thing that sets Ali above everybody else for me is Ali has wins over 2 of the top 10 heavyweights ever in their absolute prime. The only other fighter that can have that discussion is Lennox Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
And Lennox did it when Holyfield was past his best. And you can argue about Tyson. I don't think Tyson is in the top 10 ever. The Foreman wins and the Frazier wins are unbelievable. Never mind the fact that he was the first 3-time ever heavyweight champion of the world. They won gold medal at the 1960 games at light heavyweight, and then went on to become the greatest heavyweight of all time. Sonny Liston, another fighter in the top 10 of heavyweights of all time. So that's 3 guys. That's absolutely insane.
I would love to know what age Liston was, though.
Oh, I would love to. Yeah,
And Ken Northam's another one. He was on his prime when Ali lost the first one, but
yeah,
he beat him in the rematch.
The thing is with Liston, and I'm going to take George Foreman's word for this, how scary and strong Liston was. George Foreman said he's the only man to ever put him on the back foot.
Yeah,
crazy.
Now that's
Liston's
terrifying
arms.
to think of. Like,
yeah, Sonny Liston is 6 foot. Sonny Liston's arms are as longer than Vladimir Klitschko's. Like, that's the jab you're working with there.
He had a 6'6" wingspan.
Yeah,
and he was
utterly incredible.
It's like John Jones in the MMA. Like, arms are ridiculously long.
Just an absolute freak of nature. But yeah, so I have Muhammad Ali as the greatest heavyweight of all time, and it's one of those ones where, I'm just, as a very controversial one, I'm just very proud of all of us for nobody picking Mike Tyson.
Well, sorry, just to put a spanner in the works, okay? I was going to suggest, I got way too excited then when speaking about Ali, and I didn't actually do the structure that you guys did.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I just go and do my structure now?
Go for it.
Okay. So, yeah, at number 3, okay, I've got Lennox Lewis. I think he was just a great champion, wasn't he? He defended the belt for so long. He fought in a very good era. But like Adam said, I do agree, they weren't all in their prime. Holyfield and Tyson weren't in their primes, but nevertheless, it's very much a who's who on his record. And I think he came out as number 1 in that 90s era of heavyweights. So for sure, and it was a very strong era. Let's face it, it was a really good era, and Lewis came out on top. So he's my number 3. Number 2, sorry, I have got Mike Tyson in there. I think Tyson, the Kid Dynamite version of him from the 19 to 21 years old version, I think was unstoppable almost. He was
Brian Mike Tyson.
Prime Mike Tyson. That was Prime Mike Tyson, man. Like, he was a victim, like James Toney and like others. He's a victim of his own success, his own hype. He did too many things outside of the ring, ended up going to prison. I know, obviously self-inflicted, his own fault. I agree with that. And the party animal, etc. But I think Tyson is prime. If he had kept Cuss, obviously, if Cuss had stayed alive, and if he'd stayed with,
Kevin Rooney.
That's the one, Kevin Rooney. So I was going to say Kevin Barry. That's Joseph Parker's trainer, isn't it? If he kept him, I think Tyson would have been kept on the straight and narrow, and I think could have done a lot more of his career. I think he would have won a lot more fights. I think, for me, Prime Tyson beats Lennox Lewis. For me, that version. I know, big call, and
he's all right.
I'm not getting you to agree, but that's my opinion on it. And yeah, obviously we know.
I'd love the top 10 heavyweight of all time.
Yeah, I'd love that. That's got to be a special we're going to have to do one day.
I think I could articulate a good argument for my top 10, to be honest.
Yeah, same.
I'm sure you could.
Like, I understand Ali. Like, I totally understand. Like you say, Adam, rightly, he has wins over 2 of the best in the right time, in the prime and all that. But I just think, when you look at some throughout history, there's some matches out there that are wrong for Ali altogether.
That's the same for everybody. There's matches that are wrong for everybody.
Yeah, and it's the best versus the greatest argument, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction that I think gets lost a lot of the time is, are we arguing who's the best ever or who's the greatest? And I think those two distinctions need to be quite clear.
The greatest ever. Now, I do think Larry Holmes is both of those for me at heavyweight. But I like the argument I like to have is the best, because the best is the best. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's the word in itself is what it means. It's the best. Whereas the greatest is like over a resume. So like, it might not be your fault you're not the greatest. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
You're not at the right time. You don't get the right fight at the right time.
So like,
I mean, look at Hagler is a good example. At some stage, like, he could have been even better if he hadn't get that shot. We never had the best middleweight ever.
Could you imagine if Hagler would have had Golovkins and Hopkins and feckin' all those lads in the 90s?
Martinez and stuff like that.
Yeah. Like, if he'd have had them, there'd be no, like, there's not really any question anyways, but there would have been no question then.
Yeah, no, 100%.
And like, the one question mark over Lewis, as complete of a heavyweight as I think he is, Riddick Bowe.
He did stop Bowe in the Olympics in 2 rounds.
He did. But the
Riddick Bowe? What happened to him? Like, he just kind of he was up there, wasn't he? He was arguing number 1.
And he was the champ, right?
So after the Holyfield fight, Riddick Bowe does a countrywide tour of having the heavyweight titles, and as he's on tour, he puts on an outrageous amount of weight and never is able to get it back off again.
It's crazy. Like, imagine
he went up to like
Tyson or Lewis.
He went up to like 340 pounds or something.
Absolutely nuts. But so here's one for you. We're talking about Riddick Bowe is one of those fighters where if we're talking about the best that they were, their absolute peak of their peak on one night, that versus the Riddick Bowe that beats Holyfield, for me, is better than anywhere that Tyson goes.
Oh, he beats the piss out of Tyson.
Because he's all wrong for Tyson. He's all wrong
for Brownsville as well, isn't he?
Yeah. That's just my opinion. But I don't think that you should be going Riddick Bowe is a top 10 heavyweight of all time because he turned up on one night.
Like the Brownsville, I don't know what's in the water there, but you have Shannon the Cannon, Mike Tyson, Riddick Bowe. Could you imagine?
Is that Judas from there as well, isn't he? Is that Judas from there? Or is it Brooklyn? I'm pretty sure it's
Brooklyn.
Or is it Brooklyn? Oh, okay.
But it's not. It's absolutely nuts. So I'll quickly run us through the list of fighters we have before we very quickly get on to this weekend's boxing. So our champions of the original 8 weight classes over the last 50 years. At flyweight is Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. At bantamweight is Inoue Inoue. At featherweight is Alexis Arguello. At lightweight is Roberto Duran. At welterweight is Sugar Ray Leonard. At middleweight is Marvelous Marvin Hagler. At light heavyweight is Roy Jones, and at heavyweight is Muhammad Ali, just based across
And
number of votes.
just to interject there, I would 100% agree with Chocolatito.
Nice. So, yeah, so a few of them were unanimous. So I believe Gonzalez was unanimous. I think Ray Leonard and Hagler was unanimous as well. So yeah, so brilliant. Right, guys, what do we think of Katie Taylor this weekend?
Unknown quantity that she's in against. I think it's one of those kind of her record looks very good. I don't know much about her opponent, but it's one of those she needs to be switched on. She needs to. I hope she's trained, taking it seriously, and there's big fights ahead if she wins. For Katie Taylor, she needs to keep it going. But obviously, this is a mandatory challenge she has, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
she's fighting. So I don't know much about her. I know she's not a big household name who she's fighting, but I can imagine she's very good by looking at her record.
Every fight now for Katie is going to be about what has Katie got. She's been in a lot of wars. Whether you think she's won them or lost them, they put miles on the clock. And now I've seen Katie saying she has a love for the sport, as she's always had it. She's going to be around for as long as she wants. But the fact to me is that she's going to defend these belts on Saturday. And rumours are she's going to head up to 10 stone 5 to fight Cyborg in a crossover match. Getting back down to 135 then, or maybe 130 if, Baumgardner becomes undisputed and challenges her to undisputed versus undisputed or whatever. Just what does Katie have left on the clock is my question. I think she's going to win this weekend. She looks very sharp. She always looks good in the pads and that. But I think she will beat this girl. This is this girl's first time at the big dance, and I don't think it's going to be the right time for her. I think Katie's going to win, but it's not going to be a stoppage. I think it's just going to be points decision.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's Katie has been visibly on the decline up until the Serrano fight, and then that Serrano fight was the performance of her career. It was phenomenal. I do think you're right. I think it's definitely one of those just like a mark time fight where Katie's like got to keep active, got to defend her belts. I think you are right. I think they're setting up the Cyborg fight at Croke Park. Have I got that correct?
I think so, yeah.
And then I actually don't think they'll do the Baumgardner fight. If they're going to do an undisputed versus an undisputed fight, it's the winner of McCaskill, Chantel Cameron at 10 stone.
140.
At 140, which would suit Katie a little more than having to go down at her age to 130. I think if Baumgardner wins, which moves up to lightweight, Baumgardner will go after the remnants of Katie's belts when she eventually lets them go. On the undercard, anything of note for anyone? I'm looking forward to seeing Ellie Scotney challenging for the European title and becoming mandatory challenger for the Bantamweight Championship.
Gary Cully.
Haven't looked into the card, sorry.
That's all right. Is Gary challenging for a title as well?
Lightweight. Really skillful.
It looks gone.
I think we've lost him there. He was eulogising. We'll let Luke.
Let me have a look at the undercard a sec.
That's fine. And then the other fight out in America this weekend is Vasily Lomachenko's return against Ortiz. And another one of the fights that they're looking set up for him versus Devin Haney early to mid next year, I would imagine.
Yeah, it's a fight that Lomachenko should look good in doing so. Could be a banana skin, but doubt it. And I think, they're pretty much using this fight for him to look good again, and then put him in against Haney or whoever's next, or Tank, or wherever they want to. But I think it'll be Haney because same promotion makes sense, doesn't it? Easier to make.
I don't think they're going to give Tank. I don't think Tank gets the Loma fight. I don't think he wants it particularly there. But I think with their top rank, I think the whole point of bringing Haney over on that kind of 3-fight deal is Kambosos, Lomachenko, and I think this is just for Loma to blow off the dust for the from the Ukrainian war where he's been busy, and hopefully his shoulders in one piece. Now I think we've lost Luke because if Ender's away, what's going to happen is I can't let Luke back in. So I think he's stuck. So I'm going to assume Luke was a big fan of Gary Cully. I'm just going to move on from there. So I expect Lomachenko to look good. And a channel's friend, Ronnie Ramirez, is on the undercard as well. So hopefully I would like to see him in versus Lara after Lara won last weekend. Would you like to see Ramirez, Lara?
Yeah, that'd be a great fight for sure.
Yeah, a really good fight. Thank you for that, Michael. Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Ender. I'm going to attempt to end this broadcast now. So good luck.
Let's hope let's all watch Liverpool's demise against Ajax.
Yeah, hopefully not. Right, guys. Have a good evening. We'll see you next week.
Cheers, guys.